All right, good day, my dear listeners and subscribers from all over the world. You are welcome to another awesome episode of your favorite political talk show, The Truth with Ben Jokes. Now, Nigeria continues to deteriorate in every aspect as days go by. And at this point, personally, I am beginning to wonder if it is still possible to ever redeem this country, because it appears as if many Nigerians are not even aware of how terrible the situation will become in few months to come. Few hours ago, a touching story regarding insecurity began making the rounds. A nursing mother left her little baby at home and went to pay ransom for another child of hers who was kidnapped. Unfortunately, the kidnappers grabbed her and the money and they abducted her. Many wept upon hearing this ugly update. Imagine the kind of things happening to people in this country. And this story is coming fresh out of Katsina State. This is what Nigeria has become under the APC. But with all this going on, the leaders of northern Nigeria have their sights on something else. Their own goal is just to Islamize Nigeria. Hours ago, the National Assembly got into a very heated debate when members representing northern Nigeria came up with talks about Sharia law being expanded in the Nigerian constitution. Can you imagine that? With all what is happening in this country now, Sharia law is what matters to these men. And just as Nigerians were pondering over this hunger for Islamization by northern Nigeria, the IMF dropped a bomb on Nigerian media space. For a very long time now, many Nigerians, especially Tinubu supporters, have said that Tinubu's policies were handed over to him by IMF, that he's playing out their scripts, it's not his fault. And for a while, it looked like the IMF accepted that role. But now that the policies have failed, now that it has become obvious that there is no light at the end of the tunnel, the IMF has come out to deny Tinubu. They said he took the decisions on these policies on his own. Before I show you details of the Sharia debate at the National Assembly and the disclaimer by IMF which shocked Tinubu supporters, let me quickly show you this video of Senator Abaribe confirming that even with the cabinet reshufflement, Tinubu's failure is certain. See the video.
That the problem is the cabinet. That is my own view. My view is this, that there are fundamentals that the president ought to have taken into consideration even before you constitute your cabinet and you decide this is your economic direction. Failure to deal with those fundamentals is where we are. So it doesn't matter who you put there. Put an Einstein there, he will still fail. And what are the fundamentals? First, we're a poor country, very poor, with massive debt overhang. What do you do when you're poor? When you come in and then you have to do something, the first thing you do is you cut your coat according to your size. But we came in, and the first thing is you bloat your cabinet, which means that the cost of governance is not going down. Everybody in this country expected that you should be able to shrink according to, even if you don't do everything, but at least. But now you have a runaway cost of governance. Everything is being given to everybody free of charge. We are buying new plane. We are doing all that. What do you expect? Those things must be paid for. What does the man on the street see? He sees you living in extravagance.
That includes you.
Of course it includes me.
Okay.
Yes. He sees you living, he sees you enjoying, and you're telling him things are getting rougher, and he's seeing inflation, he's seeing a cost of fuel, he's seeing the cost of electricity. So what do you expect? All you're going to get on the street is mass anger. So that is the first one. That's the fundamental. What's the second fundamental? So the president is firing every minister. He didn't fire the Minister of Petroleum. Why? Because what is the fundamental thing that we used to have foreign exchange. It's just how much oil we can produce. And so that should have been your very, very focus to say, how do we increase the quantum of oil that we produce so that, first of all, we pay off all the debts that have been borrowed by the previous government. And by the way, an irony here is that this was also an APC government that brought us to this point. And then we have another APC government coming, and that APC government is pretending that that was not part of its history. You see what I'm saying? So that fundamental, the second one, what are those things that we ought to do? You should deal with that. So when you leave all that, bring in 100 ministers, let them also be running around. What are they going to do? Essentially, once you're doing production of oil that is less than 2.3, 2.5, you're not going to do much. So you fall back to what? To debt. And then you borrow. And then you go on at the same time to say, I'm going to do massive works. Oh, I'm going to do Calabar to Lagos, Lagos to... Those things are very nice and very... But funded with what?
You heard that. This is what we have pointed out as political analysts many times. It is not about reshuffling cabinet. It is about the fundamentals that make up Tinubu's administration, any Tinubu administration, either at the state or federal level. The fundamental is corruption, so it cannot work. And just as Senator Abaribe has pointed out there, first of all, his government is wasteful and it lacks focus. So whoever he brings in will follow in that direction, so nothing will work. And secondly, he sacked the wrong ministers. The petroleum sector has failed woefully, yet he didn't sack anyone in that sector. And petrol is the most important driver of the economy of this country. And this simply means that he has no plan to improve the economy. And his Minister of Defense, Matawale, has been exposed by the governor of his state, Zamfara State, to be a sponsor of terrorism. Some terrorists even made videos calling his name and talking about the activities they had with him, yet he remains in office. And insecurity is one of our biggest problems today in this country. So the fact remains that the Tinubu regime has no plan to spare this country at all. They want to run it to the ground. Point blank, period. Now, let us look at those updates that have become the major talking points in the Nigerian political media space right now. First, the debate amongst House of Rep members on the expansion of Sharia law in the Nigerian constitution. And secondly, the disclaimer issued by IMF on Tinubu's policies. Let's start by watching part of the video of that debate amongst House of Rep members, and ensure that you watch this video to the end so that you can see that dumb argument by that House of Rep member backing the expansion of Sharia law in the constitution. Let's watch the video.
Mr. Speaker, our constitution allows for freedom of worship of all religions. Mr. Speaker, we would not sit in this hollow chamber and restrict ourselves to just a few. If we begin to put such components into the constitution, tomorrow the ecclesiastical faction comes up. The day after, the traditional faction comes up. The day after, all other components begin to come up. And what happens to our grand norm that is supposed to be the foundation of our existence? Mr. Speaker, Nigeria has never limited anybody from practicing his religion. You go to states like in the north, where you have Sharia being practiced as the criminal code for those states. It is because it's peculiar to them as a people and as a persons. By the time we begin to expand it and bring it into our constitution, we are not an Islamic state. We're a secular state. We're not a celestial state. We're a secular state. We are not a traditional worship state. We're a secular state that respects and gives everybody a sense of belonging. We're a nation. We need to be sensitive to the mood and the existence, freedom of speech, freedom of association, to live in happiness, not a scenario whereby there could be some misconceptions. To this end, I wish to crave the indulgence of the sponsor of this bill that he steps it down for more legislative input and consultation, which would be more in tune with our beliefs and the norms. But I do not believe it is a legislation that should pass for second reading. I so submit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, my respected colleagues. I want to comment as the second to the last speaker spoke. In fact, the bill that was moved by the sponsor, we are supposed to commend him. I agree Nigeria is a secular state where we have different opinions, traditions, religion, and what have you. But if you see this motion or this bill, it will help Nigerians to know that these commercial banks, especially Taj Bank and what have you, many people have perceived that these banks are specifically for Muslim, while it is not. So by expanding this nature, I believe when it is encompasses to everybody, many people will see the benefit of this bill, and I believe in the near future, many people will see that the mover put this in a right direction. Thank you very much.
You heard that, and you can see that the last House of Rep member who spoke is not normal upstairs. His type is the reason many believe Nigeria is a failed state, because what is such a man doing at the National Assembly in the first place? And it is just a shame that we can even gather and discuss such a bill as a people. But after a very heated debate where more than 10 House of Rep members spoke, the bill was finally trashed. West Africa Weekly reports, reps reject bill to expand scope of Sharia law, saying Nigeria is not an Islamic state. The Nigerian House of Representatives has rejected a bill seeking to broaden the application of Sharia law beyond personal matters. The bill, sponsored by Rep. Aliyu Baba Misal from Bauchi, proposed amending sections of the Constitution to include Islamic international and commercial laws. Misal argued that this would help banks like Jaiz and Taj operate more effectively. In Nigeria, Sharia law is primarily applied in personal matters such as marriage, inheritance, and family disputes within Muslim communities. Its jurisdiction is mostly limited to northern states with significant Muslim populations. Nigeria is a secular state, thus the expansion of Sharia law into criminal or commercial is illegal. So the bill was rejected, and CNC here says the sponsors of the bill were motivated by the Muslim ticket of APC party. To them, this is the right time to strike. Nigeria remains a secular state. Even if the bill had scaled through, it will still be restricted to and implemented only in the far north. And now the guy says, thank God it did not scale through, so that there will be no justification for Islamic rubbish in non-Islamic areas. And just as Nigerians were on that Sharia law bill matter, the IMF dropped the update distancing themselves from Tinubu's policies. Look at how the papers reported it. IMF denies asking Tinubu government to remove fuel subsidy in Nigeria, says decision is domestic. Reporters. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has denied playing a role in the removal of fuel subsidy by the Bola Tinubu-led Nigerian government. This was stated at a press conference during the IMF and World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C., United States. According to the IMF's African Region Director, Abebe Selassie, the decision reached was a domestic one. The decision was a domestic one. We don't have programs in Nigeria. Our role is limited to regular dialogue as we have with other nations like Japan or the UK, the official said, according to Vanguard. While agreeing the need for investment in critical sector of the country like healthcare, infrastructure and education, he argued that the government's choices regarding subsidy removal reflect its long-term strategy for sustainable economic growth. We recognize the significant social cost involved. The government can mitigate these by expanding social protection of the most vulnerable, he said, in reference to Nigerians affected by the impact of subsidy removal. It would be recalled that Bola Tinubu announced that subsidy was gone on May 29, 2023, a development that led to hike on fuel prices, with a litre selling for over 1,000 naira as of the time of this report. The government was accused of following the IMF policies in implementing total subsidy removal. And for a very long time, that accusation continued and the IMF said nothing about it. Until recently, when the World Bank began to roll out figures of the number of people that had fallen into poverty as a result of the policies of the Tinubu administration. And other, international bodies began to roll out the level of drop in the Nigerian economy, how our GDP has dropped. One body put out a figure that there was 92% drop in the daily consumption of petrol in Nigeria. And when all these staggering figures of economic backwardness and retrogression began to come out, it became obvious that these policies of Tinubu were going to fail woefully. And now the IMF is coming out to issue a disclaimer that they were not the ones that told him to carry out those policies, that the decisions were strictly domestic. What a shame. And look at how Nigerians reacted. Let's take some of the tweet reactions. Gigi here says, so who is lying? IMF boys, World Bank analysts, or Tinubu's unscripted agitation to scream subsidy is gone? We don't know who is lying here again. But one thing we do know is that the policies have failed and everybody is trying to bail. Everybody is trying to run away from taking responsibilities. And this tweet here by CC Derek says, this is of no consequence. He wasn't forced. The responsibility for our autonomous actions is ours. Now IMF stand for podium on inauguration day, open mouth yarn subsidy is gone. A clueless Tinubu had better be surrounded by smart people, but bigotry no grill now. Ngwanu, that is it. When you knew you were clueless, you should have made the right appointments. You should have surrounded yourselves with the right people who can do the job, who can advise you well. But as usual, all his appointments were based on bigotry and corrupt political connections. And here we are, the result, a total disaster. So, for those who are still seeing light at the end of the tunnel for this Tinubu regime, here is another one. Here is another proof that you guys have to stop deluding yourselves. This is the IMF backing out. Everybody knows the support that the IMF gave. In fact, I stand to say that they were a major part of that decision. And I know their aim. Their aim was to gradually make Nigeria weak, to make the people weak so that the country can just be at their best, so that they can do whatever they want, take over the resources of the country, just like powerful nations have been doing in other African countries. But everything is happening so fast. The deterioration is happening so fast, and it is becoming so clear that these decisions, these policies are a disaster. That is why the IMF is now trying to bail out, to make it look as if they are not involved. But I know they are heavily. Tinubu's policies are a disaster that nobody wants to be associated with. Imagine, look at the number of children that are out of school in Nigeria as we speak. I keep saying it, maybe in December or early January, UNESCO is going to release the actual figure, or something close, something around the actual figure, and you will be shocked when you hear it. And there is no better way to destroy the future of a nation than to cripple the educational system. And that is exactly what Tinubu's policies have brought upon Nigeria. Tinubu and the APC. This is exactly what they have brought upon Nigeria. And 92%, according to reports, there is a 92% drop in the consumption of petrol in Nigeria daily. The daily consumption of petrol in Nigeria has dropped by 92%. That means the daily production capacity of Nigeria has dropped by about that same figure. That should tell you that the GDP is in ruins. So these are some of the consequences of these policies. That's why the IMF is trying to back out. That's why they are running away. This is what the APC and Tinubu have brought upon Nigerians. And that is why I keep saying that these guys have come to kill, to steal, and to destroy. And it is Nigerians that are the receiving end. So it is better for us to put our sentiments aside, come together, and take our country back by first getting the APC out of power. But until then, make I still enter town. Make I go get some ogbonge political news wey una go like. Why? Because of una I dey here. So don't go away. Don't go away.